Aloha, welcome to everybody. This is I guess, special edition of The Traveling Doctor. It is May 18th, 2020, and I'm actually got a small break from my night shift. I'm doing a couple night shifts, and I may have to cut off this podcast early. If the emergency room calls or it interrupts my phone, because basically I'm technically admitting right now and helping cover the hospital. So welcome to Dave, welcome to Ann coming in. I know it's a little late than I normally do it, so it's about 10 p.m. on the West Coast and 2 a.m. on the East Coast, or 1 a.m. on the East Coast. So there's a lot to go through today. And I guess I'll try to just punch it out, starting with the biggest news. So what I want to cover today is, number one, the news about obviously, unless you're living on a rock, the Regeneron vaccine and what that means for COVID and just stuff for us in general. Number two, I want to talk a little bit about vitamin D, because that was also a really big kind of debate and issue about COVID-19 and treatment of it. And I've tried to keep myself up to date on the newest research and opinions. So vitamin D and what role it has in COVID-19, staying healthy, infection, does it have any role, no role? I do want to talk a little bit more about hydroxychloroquine, because again, if you're under a rock, unless you're under a rock, you know that Trump outed himself as basically sneaking doses of hydroxychloroquine and taking it every day for the last couple of weeks, even though he's not sick. So I know we've talked about it a ton, so I just want to address it a little bit and go into some of those ideas about what's going on with the new news. And number four, I kind of want to talk a little bit generally about vaccines and antibodies. So the antibodies, the antibody tests. And again, I talked a little bit about this and the rapid test and why there's a problem with it. But I think I want to rehash it a little bit today. Welcome to Rosa coming in. So quickly, the results, of the Regeneron vaccine came out, and everyone flipped out, and everyone loves this, that it showed that, antibodies were formed, and they tested it at 3 different concentrations. I think 25 micrograms, 50 micrograms, 100 micrograms. And they were testing it to see which would give the best response. I have to say though, really, everyone loves this. The stock market loves it. Everyone is pretty happy because they're going out and stuff is reopening. But I'm not convinced for a lot of reasons. And I think a few other doctors who know about stuff aren't totally convinced. And again, I'm not an ID, infectious doctor, disease doctor, epidemiologist, but my concern is a couple things, which I'll get into after talking about the results. So there's, again, this is a phase 1 trial. So first of all, there are very few patients, okay? There are only 45 patients. And one of my biggest problems with this is that they only really reported on 8 patients of these 45. So I'm not totally clear why they didn't report on all 45 of the 8, all 45 instead of just 8. What happened to the other 37? And they basically said that 8 out of 8 that they released results for created these antibodies, regardless of whether they got 25 micrograms, 100 micrograms. Even the 25 microgram dose of the vaccine sorry, it's not Regeneron. I said the company wrong. It's Moderna, so not Regeneron. So Moderna, it made this vaccine, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, again, Moderna, I have to say, this is a pharmaceutical company that's been sort of a Wall Street darling, and everyone's loved it. But I just found out today, they don't even have one single product on the market. They don't have any successful product. This is their first one. So my point is it's good. They're sort of first on the ground, and they are first to go to phase 2. And if you believe them and everything goes well, they say they'll have a vaccine, and phase 3 will be by the summer, and they'll have vaccines ready by the beginning of 2021 for, again, probably the highest risk people and first care responders like me. I don't know what we're going to find from these results. Again, they show that you have antibodies, and they they said one key thing was that they found that when they tested this sort of dose of antibodies and the vaccine in rats or mice, they found that the mice were able to fight off the lung infection, the lung problems of COVID-19. And that's pretty nice because, again, the cytokine storm and the destruction of the lungs and not being able to get them off the ventilator is the main thing we worry about with these COVID-19 patients. So all in all, I mean, it was positive news. This doesn't change the time frame at all because we always knew, even Fauci said and other people have said, like, the earliest we're going to get this is 2021. So the timetable hasn't been moved up at all. We're not going to suddenly get this vaccine. We aren't suddenly going to be able to run around everywhere like and not wear masks and not social distance because this isn't an immediate medicine that we can get. This still has to go through phase 2, phase 3, and most importantly, my other big issues with the vaccine study from Moderna, besides they haven't really released a lot of results, is that besides needing more data, we need to actually see that this vaccine doesn't just create antibodies, but it creates a immune response, a protective effect for older people. Because first of all, most of the subjects were 18 to 55, and as you obviously know, that's not considered high risk. I don't know about their demographics and whether they had comorbidities or whatever, but generally they weren't over 65. So, and those are the people who are dying the most, as everyone knows, and I'm sure some of your COVID-19 denier friends have said. That's the problem. So I want to know if this actually, number one, works for older people to bring up that immune response, and number two, does it actually give a protective effect for humans? Like, it's great if we have antibodies in our blood, but always the problem has been, and welcome to Monica coming in, always the problem has been us saying, are we actually saying for sure that these antibodies in the blood will provide us immunity? You've heard all the studies or the new articles, and you've read them about people getting possibly reinfected. Now, again, some of those reinfections may have just been faulty tests, like their first test or their second test that showed they were clear was negative and it was a false negative, and maybe they never really cleared it. The other problem is, again, and so this is the whole warning about antibody tests. So maybe I'll jump a little bit to the antibody test. And, the idea that the antibodies themselves, if we have antibodies, do they protect us? Do they let us go out and do everything and not worry and get to travel, do everything else? I don't know. I mean, again, like I said in the other podcasts, I think the antibody level will probably give us some level of immunity, but we cannot say how long because we haven't had this disease long enough and studied people with antibodies long enough to know. So that's my real big concern. And with the antibody tests, again, I know there's a lot of confusion because everyone hears, oh, Abbott tests aren't good anymore. There are a lot of false negatives and the CDC is warning against it. And that's not actually true. The actual truth is that it's the rapid antibody test the rapid Abbott test, which is a problem, not the normal one, okay? So the rapid Abbott test is the one that they've been very, very concerned about, what they call point of care test. And a point of care test, welcome to Andrea coming in, I think from my cousin all the way over from Asia, where they're doing really, really well. So again, the Abbott test, which is the major antibody test that they are using in the U.S., has a problem with this right now. And so now the one that they're using is the rapid one that they just kind of are able to, you swab it and you get it within 15 minutes. That's the one that was supposed to be really good. So basically, the FDA put out a warning around it. I wouldn't do any rapid tests. If you're going to get tested by your nose swab or by blood, make sure you do the normal slow test. And the slow test isn't super slow. It'll come back within a day. So that's the news about the Moderna vaccine. And possibly we could have a vaccine as soon as 2021. But we always knew that. So, while it's reason for hope, we really have to see what the phase 2 trials and the phase 3 trials and actually whether, there's good results from this long term. So I also wanted to talk about vitamin D. Vitamin D is a huge, huge issue. And welcome to Andrea again. Yeah, please say hi to all the cousins for me. I'm trying to give my podcast on COVID-19 for people to watch later. So Taiwan has done an excellent job, by the way. I mean, even better in some ways than Hawaii. So I'm really, really proud of everyone there and how they were able to keep stuff down. And, one of the things we share in similarity with Taiwan is Hawaii is an island. So we're able to control the flow of people in and out. And that's been a big source of debate, which I'll go into later as well. So vitamin D. So the vitamin D has been a real dilemma. A lot of people, a lot of articles are starting to say, oh, well, we need more vitamin D. That people with low vitamin D are showing that they have more disease, or they're more likely to get sick from COVID-19. Now, honestly, I've read so many different studies, I can't even say which one is which, but some studies don't say that. Some of the studies are actually saying that there's only a minimal decrease in vitamin D. So basically, one study looked at severe patients, severe vitamin D deficient, or severe hospitalized patients, and others looked at moderate or less sick patients. And they tested their vitamin D levels. And what they found was the really sick patients, generally more of them, 17.5% or almost 18%, had lower vitamin D levels of those very sick people. But in the moderate group, in other words, the less sick group, it was not as much, but it was still 14% or something. So there's a 3% difference. So does that mean, well, vitamin D is important and we need vitamin D? That's really hard to say. So I don't know that's really the truth. I mean, a lot of the major doctors in the U.S. are essentially saying that vitamin D may be useful, and that instead of just checking everyone for vitamin D and vitamin D levels, just take your normal, dose of vitamin D. And a lot of people can get that from the sun and that sort of thing. But in case you're not getting enough sun, you're working all day, you don't live in a sunny area, even though it's getting warmer, that you can take a supplement. They say something like just if you get 1,000 international units of vitamin D, that's enough to give you this protection. Or even one multivitamin that has 400 to 800 international units a day of vitamin D should be enough. Of course, some of the doctors that are more hardcore about says, oh, well, you should get an injection for it and get some massive amount, 100 or 300,000 international units all at once. And that will be like a depot, like a fuel kind of tank of vitamin D that will carry you through for 1, 2, 3 months and protect you. I don't know. Again, I think that's hard, and it's not a great use of our resources when we don't know that it definitely helps prevent COVID-19. Maybe it helps us stay healthier. But again, if you can do that by just taking a vitamin, I see no problem with that. There are not a lot of side effects from vitamins like that. If you take too much, your body just pees them out. It's not like hydroxychloroquine or anything else. So my best advice would be, for now, get your vitamin D. Maybe you want to take a gummy or a vitamin D tablet, and maybe it will help you. Again, one thing I have to note is that they mainly found that the people who had an issue with vitamin D being low and being really sick COVID patients was not everyone. Once again, unfortunately, it's one of those things where it wasn't really applicable to white people or normal people. It was Black people and Asian people. Welcome to Todd, my old friend. Again, always a regular at these podcasts coming in from Long Island. So Todd, I'm talking about vitamin D right now in COVID-19. So, essentially what I was saying was that they've showing that really the vitamin D that's low is only really happening in the at-risk population in minorities, specifically Black and Asians, what they call the sort of a Black and Asian at-risk population. For some reason, Hispanics weren't included in this, or maybe they didn't find it in them yet. But essentially, they showed low vitamin D levels in these minorities in those COVID-19 patients that were really sick who were Black and Asian, but not white. So there's sort of this argument that maybe you should take vitamin D. Now, again, I don't think you need to go nuts, but taking a supplement may be helpful. Let's keep an ear out for it. This is preliminary data. Again, this is like everyone testing everything, like they were testing hydroxychloroquine before, and all these different things. So Monica says, do good that all this quarantine thing gave me so much opportunity to spend more time at the beach. So Monica, yeah, it's great. One of the good things that's useful is that Hawaii opened up, and we did really well for the last 14 days. As I mentioned in the last podcast, we've had 0 cases, 1 cases, 4 cases, 0 cases, 2 cases, 0 cases, 0 cases. We had another day of 1 case yesterday and 0 cases today. So we're doing excellent for more than 2 weeks. So on Saturday, they opened up all the beaches. It was great. I actually went on Sunday to the beach. And normally I've been going for surfing, but I actually laid out on the beach. And, to be honest, I thought Waikiki was going to be packed. And it wasn't that bad. I went to Fort DeRussy Beach, which is where Monica knows where that is. And because there's not so many tourists, it was super easy to keep 10 feet of space between me and the other people. And there were police sort of like going around and looking around, but generally like everyone's keeping to themselves, and not everyone was in a mask because obviously when you're sweating and in sunblock on the beach, you don't want to wear a mask as much. But again, I think if you're far away, 10 feet away, that's interesting that, that we have that room. But again, I very much worry about when we have the people come in from overseas or from the mainland and how that will change, because the beaches will be packed. There'll be no way to separate 6 feet in the middle of Waikiki. Anyone who's been to Waikiki knows that. So again, the good news is that Hawaiians, as you can tell, are getting darker every day. We get our sun and we get our vitamin D. I may still take a vitamin D multivitamin myself, just because I can take it with my other, medicine I take in the morning, and it's not that much of a problem for me. So I think that's useful. But again, let's see the data that comes out from it. One word, and I know I'm sort of jumping around everywhere, but before I talk about hydroxychloroquine, I want to talk a little bit about social distancing. I read a really interesting article in Science magazine that came out of Germany. And it's really, really complicated, but what it boils down to is that these epidemiologists looked at social distancing and what worked and what didn't work. And welcome to Janelle coming in, my old coworker too, and nurse, I believe she's in California now. So one of the pharmacist. So one of the things that is really working in terms of, they see social distancing. Germany looked at 3 types of major social distancing. They looked at large events. They looked at schools closures, and they looked at gatherings or workplaces or restaurants or whatever where there was tight distance. I don't know what their definition was, but where you were closer to somebody. And I'm not sure what's the difference between that and a group event like a concert or something else, because I figure there's not that much distancing going on there either. But the interesting thing they did, they threw a bunch of statistical models, and they said that supposedly the only thing that was shown to be statistically different to decrease COVID-19 was not large gatherings, was not schools closures, but only the third category, when you're keeping people close to each other. For example, hair salons, welcome to Charles coming in, hair salons or crowded bars or those sorts of things. This Science article essentially said that it was only the third thing, the tight quarters, that showed a statistical difference in the rates of COVID cases, as opposed to school closures or as opposed to large gatherings. Now, again, this is prelim info, and I don't know that states anything. We don't really know. And again, Charles, welcome to Dr. Okamura. He is working very hard on the East Coast with COVID-19 as well. And again, Chuck, we're really doing well in Hawaii, not like New York. So again, I'm talking about a lot of those data that's coming out of New York and coming out of Hawaii. So we're doing well. We're opening up, but as you know, New York is not really opening up as easily as some of the other states. There's only parts of New York and not New York City as much. As you all know, 48 out of 50 states have completely opened up, and some states are really ready for it. The ones that are better prepared for it. Obviously, Hawaii's doing really well. There's, I think, like Wyoming and South Dakota, Nebraska, certain other ones. But ones like Texas, the rates are still rising. Georgia is sort of like, we're not sure. And New York is going down, but they're being very careful. So we have to see, again, as I've always said, in 2 to 3 weeks is when we will really know, because the reopening didn't really start until May 4th to May 6th. Of course, everyone feels great right now, and no one sees anything besides numbers are maybe kind of flat or going down. Or even if they're going up, like in California, they don't care. They're still going out and they love their beaches. So I think we have to be really, really cautious. No doctor I know, welcome to Shanna coming in from California. So no doctor I know thinks that, we should just completely ignore social distancing and mask wearing and all that other stuff. So a couple other things I want to bring up. There's this whole idea that, people are wearing masks and they don't work for anything. Why are we using them? And, it's, the number one meme I've been seeing around is this whole idea that, if you fart in a mask, by the way, TST, Shanna says, hi, I love TST. I'm not sure what TST refers to, Shanna. So if you look, some people are saying, if you can smell a fart through jeans or something else, then why should you wear a mask? Because the mask won't protect you against the mask doesn't protect you against a fart. It won't protect you against virus. Oh, sorry, Shannon. Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm glad you enjoy the podcast. So what I have to say to those idiots who didn't take the time to even Google this or anything, is that the reason you smell a fart through jeans and through a mask is because the gas, the methane gas and those other things is way smaller than the micron of the, either your jeans or your mask. It's way smaller than 3 microns. So the general size of the COVID-19 virus is about 3 microns. Your typical gas molecule is way smaller than that. So even a surgical mask like this that can keep, viruses away, it's not going to keep all gas away, okay? So, so Shanna, I am talking about farts, but look earlier, you can see me talk about vitamin D and hydroxychloroquine, or not yet, about vitamin D and the antibody tests, and a little bit about the new Moderna vaccine, all the news related to that. Welcome to Fong coming in from Hawaii. So again, I think it is good that we're opening up and we're getting exposure to that vitamin D. And welcome to Kirsten coming in all the way from Norway. Man, we got a really international audience today. Taiwan, Norway, all over, Hawaii, East Coast, West Coast. So I think it's good that we get vitamin D. You can get it through the sun or through a supplement. But here's the interesting argument against vitamin D. Certain countries that were sunny, like northern Italy and Spain, had a lot of vitamin D, a lot of sun exposure, but they still, as you know, had horrible rates of COVID-19. So the vitamin D didn't help them. And for example, other countries that didn't have a lot of sun exposure, like Norway, Sweden, Scandinavia, had actually high levels of vitamin D that they saw. And so they didn't have as much sun and they still had this vitamin D. So there's something that's not quite right about this vitamin D argument. Like, who knows who is supplementing, who is taking stuff. Welcome to Jerry coming in all the way from LA and Orange County. So, I don't know what the final argument is about vitamin D. So I've talked about the Moderna vaccine, vitamin D. I've talked about masks and social distancing. Oh, so and I talked a little bit about antibody tests as well. One thing I want to bring up again is this idea about hydroxychloroquine. And again, the big news is Trump uses hydroxychloroquine. So I know the news had a field day. CNN, all the news organizations are all saying, Trump's an idiot. Why is he doing this? Monica says, Northern Italy, which had the biggest amount of cases, cold and not sunny. Sisters I know did not have so many cases in the northern part of Italy. Okay, Monica, that's interesting to know. Okay, so, maybe they weren't as sunny. Maybe they didn't have as much vitamin D. But, my point is it wasn't about the sun. It was about the vitamin D levels. I think they actually tested the vitamin D levels of people in Spain and in Italy. And all parts of Italy, they generally had high vitamin D levels anyway, even without sun or no sun or whatever. Some of them, they weren't protected by it. So my point is the argument about vitamin D is still out really right now. We'll have to see what more data shows. Welcome to Brian coming in from Hawaii. So hydroxychloroquine, so everyone made fun of Trump taking this thing. And I think it was even so bad. And welcome to Anjali, my old Cedars-Sinai colleague coming in. So everyone made fun of Trump about this hydroxychloroquine. I think even Pelosi, and welcome to Notaporn, my Natalie coming in from my old Herrick's classmate, and Charles saying, gotta be well, gotta go, be well. Thank you for taking care of my homeland. Chuck, Dr. Okamura, thank you for taking care of New York City and NYU. It's been a really busy time there, and please stay safe. Yeah, you're doing much better work than I am, I think, right now. So the hydroxychloroquine, to talk about it, Nancy Pelosi even got on CNN and made fun and trolled and threw shade at Donald Trump, saying, well, he's morbidly obese and older, so he shouldn't be taking hydroxychloroquine. Again, all the studies, and the reason you don't talk about hydroxychloroquine right now is that the studies have showed that in the sickest patients, it hasn't been working to reduce hospitalization, reduce deaths, reduce anything. But that's in the sickest population. So, Trump may be wrong or he may be right. I have to tell you, there is a chance he may be right, but just by luck. They haven't really studied, most importantly, hydroxychloroquine hasn't been effectively studied in mild outpatient people. Trump's argument, and some even, I'll be honest, even doctors' arguments. I know some, and I won't say who, it's not me, but I know doctors, ER doctors that take care of a lot of COVID-19 patients, other people. who try and take hydroxychloroquine for themselves and even give it to their patients leaving, because it's still being used off-label. And some of them still use it with the idea that it may not be good for the second cytokine storm phase, but it may be good for the other phase, for the earlier phase, before you get really sick. We don't have the data yet. Again, the first big study is the NIH study that is showing hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin in mild patients. So we got to watch out for that study, and I'm sure that study results will be out in another 1 to 2 months. That's a really important one. So don't think that you heard the last of hydroxychloroquine. And also, I want to be fair to Donald Trump. He's not my favorite guy, but he may not be wrong. He may be doing something protective. I will say that there is a concern about this cardiac side effect, the QT prolongation. And I would rather that they study hydroxychloroquine alone, not with azithromycin. Honestly, because I'm not even really sure why they're continuing to study it with azithromycin. Because azithromycin alone, if you get a Z-Pak for pneumonia or upper respiratory tract infection, something like that, you are only getting it for 5 days, and you have a risk with cardiotoxicity and QT prolongation, even with azithromycin. So I personally think, and I don't know why they're studying it two together, or at least they should study hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin together, just hydroxychloroquine, and nothing, placebo. I think they should do that study. But again, I don't think the NIH study has those 3 arms. I think they only have the 2 arms. And welcome to Rebecca coming in from Big Island. Well, Rebecca, a long time. I'm glad everyone's doing really well in Big Island. So hydroxychloroquine, the news is not over yet. It may not be good right now, but it may be still a good outpatient medicine. And the reason why it may be important, like possibly the role of vitamin D, is that it is something that we can at least get, if not over the counter, it's a pill that we can get prescribed, and there's not as many shortages now anymore. And welcome to Julianne coming in from Hawaii also. So that's the news on hydroxychloroquine. Keep your ears and your eyes open and ears open for the hydroxychloroquine data in mild patients from the NIH that will come out in 1 to 2 months, probably around the same time we get the Moderna phase 2 trials results. So Rebecca, I'm really glad that everyone is doing very well over in Big Island, so please stay safe over there. At Hawaii, we've got a lot of advantages. We're able to quarantine off really, really well. Sort of with that wrap of hydroxychloroquine and talking about, again, anyone just joining us, previous to this, I talked about the new Moderna vaccine and what it means and what it doesn't mean, the role of vitamin D, the role of also antibody tests and the rapid tests and how some of them are bad, the role of social distancing, and I talked a little bit about hydroxychloroquine as well. One last thing, I talked a lot before about Kawasaki disease in the last 2 podcasts, and Kawasaki-like disease, and how everyone is really concerned in kids, and it's all over the world. In Italy, in China, I think they're finding it in Austria and UK, and obviously in America, like 100 cases in New York the last time I saw. And this Kawasaki-like syndrome is very concerning for parents who are seeing it in kids, and they were told that their kid should be okay if they got sick. They shouldn't have a problem. But they're still getting sick. So, and the sickness is very weird. You get this fever, you get this weird rash everywhere, you got a lot of different other symptoms. And so, I explained a little bit about what Kawasaki disease was like in kids and how you get this fever and a strawberry tongue and other things. But again, that it's not the same disease. And actually now the CDC and the FDA, or I think the World Health Organization, FDA, have put out a separate definition. They're not calling it Kawasaki-like anymore. They're calling it a specific, sort of boring, very technical name. They're calling it MIS-C. Again, multi-inflammatory syndrome. Multi-organ inflammatory syndrome in children, MIS-C. And that's what they're calling it. And they're asking doctors to keep an eye out for it. They have specific criteria about what it should be. And it's in kids who are under 19, who have fever and rash or some of these weird symptoms, who have no other explanation for being sick, and who are number 4 COVID-19 positive. So those are sort of the 4 criteria to be diagnosed with this. And why we're concerned is that there could be a lot of other organ manifestations. There could be problem with kidney disease, and you don't want kids having kidney disease and having dialysis, and even clots and all that problems with clots that I've talked about before. Oh, so, again, they aren't giving recommendations about how to treat it. In Kawasaki disease, we do use IVIG and also we use steroids, but they're not saying, either the FDA or the CDC or World Health Organization, I'm sorry, that you should use anything. Because again, we don't have enough data. We're just learning about this disease. So about clotting, what I think is really interesting, one other last study, and this is the last thing I'll say about clotting before I go into sort of the world and travel update, if I have time still, because I know it's getting a little longer. The one thing I want to talk about is that the clotting has always been an issue recently that we've been worried about. Another thing that has been a problem. So one thing that I would like to say is that the COVID-19 patients have been found a lot to have clots, and that's a really bad thing. Younger people are having massive clots and strokes. People are having like clotting happening in their dialysis catheter. They're having clotting and other things. So an interesting study came out from Austria. They had autopsies of like 11 people who died of COVID-19. So again, that's not a lot of people, but they all died of it. And what they found in every single patient's lungs of those 11 people were clots everywhere. Clots in the big arteries of the lungs and clots in the tiny small arteries at the very end of the lungs. So welcome to Mickey coming in all the way in North Shore. Also Hawaii, enjoying the beach and staying safe, hopefully. So Mickey, I'm talking about clots, and I just talked about multi-organ inflammatory syndrome in children and Kawasaki disease in COVID-19. So you can listen just before this if you want to on that. And because I know a lot of parents are worried about that Kawasaki type thing for COVID-19 kids. The other thing is, again, so the clotting is a concern because the other thing they found was that all these patients had clots in Austria and that had died with the clots in the lungs. They were actually treated already. They were being treated to prevent clots. So even while being treated to prevent clots with, I think, Lovenox or low molecular weight heparin, or enoxaparin is a generic name, they show that even these patients that are trying to protect themselves, or the doctors are trying to protect these patients against clots, they still ended up getting clots and dying of COVID-19. Maybe not because of the clots, but of something else. So it's really scary. So again, this is a very, very strange disease. Welcome to Lauren checking in from Hawaii also. So this is a strange, strange disease. It affects the head, it affects the kidney, it affects kids and skin and rashes. It affects everything there, even, again, sense of smell, neurological disease. It's a multi-organ disease. It's very, very scary. So anyone who says this is the flu, or people die of the flu, people die of everything else, of pneumonia, other things, this is not, I'm telling you guys, I've taken care of hundreds, probably thousands of flu and pneumonia patients, whatever. We do not see this all the time. The closest I can think of it is that some patients get sepsis and they have overwhelming infection of bacteria in their blood or something else, and then they do develop multi-organ failure sometimes, but not at this high percentage of COVID-19 patients. And I don't even know the percentage of COVID-19 patients that are sick that develop multi-organ failure, but from what I understand, it's a hell of a lot. It's way more than like 50% or something. So that's really, really scary. This is not the flu, you know? Again, remember the earlier data showed that something like 80% of people who were intubated and ventilated in New York died. They didn't get off the ventilator again. And again, this is before they started using things like remdesivir and acetemra. So again, we've been trying everything. And most of these drugs, like I said, can only be given IV. Or the vaccine can only be given after we do a phase 3 trial, and through doctor, we're not going to get it until beginning 2021. So what do we really have? Welcome to Sophie coming in. What do we really have for COVID-19 to protect us? We have possibly vitamin D supplements, possibly the idea of, does hydroxychloroquine maybe work for milder patients? We still have to prove it. And besides that, it's just protective, preventative stuff, all the things we're doing, social distancing, washing our hands, wearing our masks, doing these things. So, I definitely am concerned generally about stuff. But I'll be honest, being in Hawaii, I would rather be here than anywhere else that I've ever been to spend this pandemic. Because, gosh, 0 cases, 1 cases, 4 cases, 0 cases, 1 case, 0 case, 0 case, 1 case, 0. I mean, we're doing excellent. We are essentially like as good as New Zealand or even Taipei or whatever. And we don't have as many people. And we have a way of controlling people coming in. The problem is sooner or later people will come in. And I will tell you, what I've noticed with Hawaii opening is that the beaches aren't as crowded. People are still social distancing, but some people are starting to slip up and not wearing their masks quite as much. So Mickey agrees. She lives in North Shore, which is doing really, really well. And again, I think we have to make an idea about how we're going to protect Hawaii going forward. And there's a reason why we have to do this. And I want to mention a really interesting statistic about people like, well, why can't we just come into Hawaii and do everything? Welcome the miles coming in. Why don't we just let everybody come into, and because we have a 40% unemployment and all of like Hawaii is suffering, not having these jobs to give to people. So, yeah. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. I actually have to go right now. I have a call from the emergency room. I'll try to pick this up again a little bit later and talk about this, okay? Again, I'm the traveling doctor, Dr. Albert Lin. I will check back in with you a little bit later to finish this up, okay? And thanks again for checking in. Bye.